Hello, everybody. I am Xanthe, co-founder at Green the UK and your partner in supporting UK wildlife. You are here today as your company has already helped us plant thousands of climate resilient trees around the country. Some of you have also helped plant trees in schools and local communities. To do this, you have joined forces with the Royal Forestry Society, the Royal Scottish Forestry Society, and Green the UK. Your support has helped people plant trees that will survive and thrive into the future, creating better, more resilient treescapes for our environment, for people, and for the economy. I like the way that one student described it after helping plant trees in their school grounds. This is our legacy. They will be here forever, and that is because of us. Whatever your reason for supporting tree planting, trees have far-reaching benefits for all of us. I would like to thank you for joining us this afternoon to learn more about why this work is so important from a very knowledgeable speaker who also knows how to tell a great story. Today, we are joined by Jen Turner, who has over 18 years experience working in ecology, conservation, and forestry. As development manager at the RFS, Jen works on a myriad of projects that connect people with the trees around them. She is a passionate advocate for trees and all the benefits they provide in our local and global communities. Much of her current work is focused on developing projects where trees are the key to helping mitigate against the negative effects of climate change. This includes helping to ensure that woodlands, forests, and newly planted trees can survive a rapid change in climate and the associated increase in extreme weather events. Before I hand over to Jen, I have a few quick notes on housekeeping. If you have a question, please click the Q&A button at the bottom to submit it, and my colleague Fran will go through these with Jen at the end of her presentation. The session will be recorded so that you can share it with any colleagues who are not able to attend. And now over to Jen.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy days to join us to talk about trees. So we are here to talk about, obviously, trees, but also sustainability and the future. We know that together with all you lovely people, Green the UK and the RFS are planting trees, but why is that important? And what impact is this going to have on sustainability? And quite importantly, what is our long-term vision for all of these trees that we're planting? I spend an awful lot of time banging on about how tree planting is all a little bit pointless if you haven't got someone to look after the trees right through their lifespan. When we plant trees, they tend to be just a few years old. And if you think about the fact that trees can live for hundreds of years or more, this really does make them just babies when they're planted. And like most living things, they're most vulnerable when they're young and when they're sick and when they're old. Trees need people with knowledge about trees to care for them. So wherever they can stop them getting sick, and they need to plan for their futures so they can grow up to be the best and most healthy trees possible. Why is it then that so many people are blasé about tree planting? Pop a tree in the ground and walk away. Job well done, right? Well, that's sort of wrong. Tree planting is just the beginning of the story. Now, I love stories, and I don't know about you, but I really love a good fairy tale. So if you will indulge me, I'd like you to imagine a fairy tale woodland. Got it? Good? Still with me? Okay. Now, I'm willing to bet that some of you might have imagined something like this, with sunshine and flowers and birds and butterflies and maybe the odd princess dotted here or there. And some of you might have imagined something a little bit like this, a deep, dark, thorny wood, probably full of danger. And this got me thinking, are there synergies between fairy tale woodlands and real woodlands? And I started to think that there really might be lots to learn from some of our most popular fairy stories. Let's have a look at those. Let's delve in. Ah, poor little Hansel and Gretel, living happily with their gainfully employed woodcutter father before he goes ahead and marries their evil stepmother, who, in her evil wisdom, decides that there isn't enough money to feed all four of them and hatches a plan to get rid of the kids by abandoning them in the deep, dark woodland far away from the woodcutter's house. But being enterprising sorts of kids, Hansel and Gretel learn of their evil stepmother's plan and they hatch a plan of their own. They collect all the shiny stones from around their house, fill their pockets, and drop a trail so when their stepmom leads them out into the deepest, darkest part of the wood and leaves them there until nighttime, they can follow the glinting, moonlit trail of stones back home. Success. But not quite. Stepmom isn't happy and locks them in their room until the next day when she takes them out into the woods again, this time certain that they won't be able to find their way back. Hansel and Gretel haven't had a chance to collect any more stones on account of them being locked up, and so they use a piece of stale old bread that was given to them by their stepmother in an uncharacteristic display of generosity to leave a new trail to follow. But as we all know, the breadcrumbs are gobbled up by all of the woodland birds, and Hansel and Gretel really are pretty stuck now. So they strike out on their own, find a house made of sweets, start to eat the house, become imprisoned by the resident wicked witch of said house of sweets, break free, kick the witch into the oven, and get rich from the proceeds of the sale of the sweet building materials. And how is any of this relevant to forestry? Well, it strikes me that if another woodcutter was looking after the deep, dark bit of the wood where Hansel and Gretel were taken by their stepmother, it wouldn't have been a deep, dark wood. It would have been a light, airy wood with lots of lovely pathways, glades and rides, lots of easy reference points to find their way home, no getting lost, no witch, no problem finding their way back, although admittedly they still would have an evil stepmother. Foresters take care of woodlands. They don't let woodlands become dark and overgrown. They take out trees to allow other trees in a woodland the space and light they need to grow properly. They make sure that the timber from those trees is used to make useful things like fuel, paper, staircases, and roof trusses, as well as beautiful things like wooden furniture and musical instruments. If the woodland had been in the care of a forester, Hansel and Gretel wouldn't have had a problem. But while we're on the topic of deep, dark woodlands, in fairy tales, frightening and terrible creatures are known to reside in the deep, dark woods. In the modern classic fairy tale, the Gruffalo is the scariest thing that little mouse can imagine. With his terrible tusks, terrible claws, and terrible teeth in his terrible jaws, the Gruffalo is about as formidable and scary as woodland creatures can get. This, people, is what happens when there is no friendly forester to look after a woodland. They get deep, dark, and scary creatures move in. Now, of course, I know the Gruffalo isn't real, but this wee beastie is very real indeed. May I introduce you to the spruce bark beetle? These, in forestry terms, are just about as scary as it gets. Spruce bark beetles burrow into the trunks and branches of conifer trees, causing a great deal of damage and leaving trees open to infection from diseases. Make no doubt about it, these beetles are tree killers. They've already destroyed vast tracts of woodland across Europe. Our island status here in the UK has largely prevented these non-native killers from reaching our shores, but sadly one of the most destructive species of bark beetle, it's called Ips typographus, has been found in Kent. Foresters and plant pathologists are working really hard to contain the spread of these beetles, but it is relentless. And sadly, bark beetles are just one of the many pests and diseases that are killing our trees here in the UK. It's likely to only get worse as climate change progresses and our weather becomes more and more inviting and hospitable for pests from abroad that wouldn't have otherwise survived here. This threat is exacerbated by the fact that 60% of the UK's woodlands is made up of just 6 different types of tree. These are Sitka spruce, birch, Scotch pine, oak, ash, and sycamore. This is a problem, and I will explain why a little on. But first, let's have a look at another problem we have. The UK is the second largest importer of wood products by value. We're not growing enough wood in the UK to meet our own demand for timber, paper, card, or even biomass. We are importing other countries' waste wood chips to burn in our biomass generators and calling it green energy. Imagine the impact on our carbon footprint if we could grow all or at least much more of what we need right here. Importing wood and wood products also increases the risk of accidentally introducing new pests and diseases to the UK. So let's get back to those 6 different types of trees. We know that trees are a big part of the solution for climate change, and we know that the 6 different types of trees that make up 60% of the UK's woodlands are already under threat from pests and diseases, some of which are already here and some of which are threatening our shores. What I haven't told you is that climate change is also weakening and killing our trees here in the UK. So it's probably not too much of a surprise to learn that trees don't like floods or droughts or storms very much. Weak trees are much more vulnerable to pests and diseases than strong, healthy trees, in the same way that when you're feeling run down, you always seem to catch a cold. So what can we do to help these trees survive these threats? Again, it probably won't be a surprise to you to know that planting a much wider diversity of trees is going to be key to helping our woodlands survive. Some pests affect some trees, but not others. So the more different types of trees you plant, the more chance the woodland has of surviving. We also know that our climate is changing and that we're likely to see some of the most dramatic effects of climate change in the next 50 to 80 years. When we think about the lifespan of the trees, 50 to 80 years is not really a very long time. For example, it takes about 200 years for an oak tree to reach full maturity, and these trees can live for over 1,000 years. It stands to reason that some of the trees that grow well in UK climates today might not do so well in our 50 to 80-year climate future. Although we don't know what might happen, models show that southern England might have a much more Mediterranean-style climate. Indeed, some people in London are already finding that their prized olive trees are growing perfectly happily outdoors, when previously you could only really grow these inside in the warmth. Like other planting schemes, which tend to plant between 1 and 8 different species of trees, you, in partnership with Green UK and the Royal Forestry Society, have already planted over 70 different types of trees, and we're still counting. This is absolutely incredible. And of course, we need to plant more trees to mitigate those catastrophic effects of rapid climate change. You guys are the heroes, and we need more like you. People who step up and take action to plant trees and protect wildlife. So, quick recap. Well-managed woodlands are like the beautiful fairy story woodlands, where sunlight hits the forest floor and wildflowers, birds, butterflies, and healthy trees are all given space to grow. So, if this is a fairy tale well-managed woodland, this is a real well-managed woodland. And if this is a fairy tale deep dark woodland that no one's really looking after properly, then this is a real life woodland that no one's really looking after. And if this is a fairy tale terrible woodland creature, then this is a real terrifying woodland creature. In fairy tales, many problems are solved by the friendly forester. It's no different in real life. But sometimes foresters look like this too. So I think what I'm trying to say is that we've done everything we can to make sure the trees you've planted will thrive and survive into the future. But you're the heroes of this story. Without your help, we couldn't be supporting foresters to plant resilient trees for the future. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your really busy day to come and listen to a Tree Geek talk about trees. I'd love to welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Jen, for bringing woodland management and its challenges to life for us. And thank you very much to everyone that's asked a question in the chat already. And please do keep them coming. So first question that we've got is, have the storms and changing weather over the past few years noticeably impacted UK woodlands and tree planting?
Absolutely. It's a really pertinent question. I have been on the phone to our members who've been in tears. The work that their maybe grandparents or parents have put into building a woodland, to designing a resilient woodland. Many of these woodlands, particularly in the north of England and in Scotland, have been completely flattened by these disastrous extreme storms that we're having, and it is highly likely that as our climate changes into the future, that we will see many, many more of these storms. The effects of a storm on a woodland are, like I said, absolutely devastating. It's like pickup sticks. When a well-managed woodland, when you fell trees in a well-managed woodland, those trees are carefully selected, and the trees are cut down by really skilled people who work out where those trees are going to fall so they don't harm the rest of the woodland. In a storm event, everything's flattened, everything's on top of each other, and it breaks trees halfway down. So you end up with a site that's completely inaccessible, with timber that's completely unsaleable, and with trees that have the trees that have come down that you wouldn't have planned for them coming out so soon, even if you were planning for them coming out. Obviously, from a biodiversity perspective, these storms are also quite catastrophic. Many plants and animals can lose their homes overnight, and it's likely to get worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I read a stat the other day that said that last year was our 11th rainiest year since records began. And I'm sure everyone has noticed the changes and felt the changes over the past few winters as well, which actually leads quite nicely onto the next question, which is, what positive effects can tree planting have on flooding?
So trees have all sorts of wonderful effects, but one of those in particular related to flooding is their ability to stabilize soil. So if you imagine, all plants are really good at stabilizing soil because they have these amazing root systems, but trees, being the big plants that they are, have really big root systems. And when trees are planted in soil, it gives the soil much better ability to hold back water. Trees can also stop water reaching the ground, and they can shore up banks of rivers and streams. So the effects are multifaceted, but we know that planting trees really does help to reduce the effects of floods. So.
Great. And I remember you saying on one of our volunteering events that trees can actually communicate with each other in terms of pests and diseases. They can send warning signals out to other trees in the woodlands.
This is a really exciting science, or I think it's really exciting. Some trees have the ability to have this pre-warning system, which is it sends chemical signals to other trees in the area that there's a disease or a pest that is attacking them, giving the other trees a chance to create a chemical biological response to that disease, which I find that incredible.
It's amazing. That also links quite nicely to the next question, which is, are the RFS carrying out research into new non-native species that could be more resilient and better adapted to a changing climate?
So our RFS members, we've been going for over 140 years. So our members have been growing trees and sharing their knowledge for all of that time, which much longer, obviously. But we're very lucky in that our members tend to be quite experimental and very open. It's a very open community in forestry with knowledge share. So when we find something out, we tell people about it. And native trees, we know, are really, really amazing for biodiversity. But the fact is that there actually aren't that many true native trees in the UK. And as our climate changes, we're going to need a lot more non-native and naturalised species to be grown here to provide the resilience that we need for wildlife. And yeah, absolutely. Our members are planting all sorts of different trees in all sorts of different situations and sharing the results. We're also working with research partners such as Forest Research. They're the government research arm for forestry, and they do some really interesting work on whether our native biodiversity, our native wildlife, can use non-native trees and how they're using them. So there's some really interesting research going on right now.
Great. And do you have any examples of non-native species that have been particularly good for UK biodiversity?
So you might know about the UK's native red squirrels. Grey squirrels are non-native and are also tree killers and pests, but red squirrels are quite a different story. They have been pushed out and marginalised by grey squirrels who carry this disease, squirrel pox. But actually, red squirrels have adapted really well to living in conifer woodlands, and conifers are generally, the conifers we see in the UK today are generally not native species, but some of the pine cones of these conifers are absolute fine dining for these red squirrels and are providing really, really good, really valuable habitat.
That's good news. Great. If you do have any more questions, then do keep them coming, but we've got a few more. Are the new trees planted as saplings, and where do you get these saplings from?
So yes, we generally plant trees as saplings. They tend to be a couple of years old when we plant them. Some are grown as what we call cell-grown plants, where they have a little ball of soil around their root, and some are grown as bare root plants, which, as you can imagine, have no soil. They're grown in nurseries, and we use lots of different nurseries around the UK. And sometimes we need to, because of the experimentation with different types of trees, sometimes we do need to order tree saplings from abroad. But we always use a reputable nursery to do this. It's really important that the nursery follow all of the protocol and procedure to make sure that those invasive pests and diseases are not coming into the country with plant material that they might be ordering from elsewhere. And it's also really important that they look after their trees in a really responsible way, so that we're planting the best quality trees for you when they go out into the big wide world.
Well, thank you very much, Jen, for another amazing webinar, and thank you everyone for joining and learning more about woodland management and the trees that you've helped to plant and supported. And thanks for the fairy tale spin as well, Jen. If you do have any questions, then do contact your consultant or Seeds at Greener UK, and we will hope to see you on the next one. Thank you very much again, Jen, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you all.